Mineral rights have been purchased statewide, and the state legislature has prohibited townships to ban or even regulate gas and oil exploration. Residential oil drilling will negatively impact property values and tax revenue needed to provide critical police and fire protection services. Michigan is home to 1,240 townships, which govern 96% of the land area, and the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act provides no authority to townships to ban or even regulate gas and oil exploration. The United States has approximately 3% of the total natural gas reserves. Gas and oil exploration is increasing exponentially in the Great Lakes state. In the month of August, residents in Shelby Township and Scioto Township saw property values plummet on Zillow immediately after an oil rig appeared in their neighborhood. Plus, on August 19, it was reported in the Detroit Free Press that as other states ban landfills from accepting low-level radioactive waste, up to 36 tons of the sludge already rejected by 2 other states was expected to arrive in Michigan. The Van Buren Township residents living less than a mile from the landfill are concerned about radiation leaking into the water supply. As regulations tighten in other states, companies are turning to Michigan as the radioactive sludge's dumping ground. Gas and oil exploration can cause irreparable damage, so being proactive with regulations is critical in the Great Lakes state. White Lake Township residents in close proximity to oil rigs are already experiencing brown tap water. Much like Pennsylvania residents in close proximity to fracking operations who now have to bring in thousands of gallons of water into their homes for bathing and drinking. There are 1.2 million Michigan residents remaining on wells. The state is leasing thousands of acres of mineral rights for an average price of $12 per acre versus an average price of $22,000 per acre in Texas. And there are no regulations or cost for the gas and oil industry to extract millions of gallons of water from the Great Lakes. There is a growing concern to limit drilling in residential areas with attractive environmental features. A growing number of Oakland County Township officials are demanding to have authority to regulate gas and oil drilling activity like all other commercial development in residentially zoned areas, including the notification to surrounding homeowners. The Great Lakes account for nearly 1/4 of the world's fresh water, which is desirable for both business growth and quality of life. Stewardship of this resource is critical, as drought and lack of access to clean water are necessary for the global population. The Great Lakes has been reported at a historical low in 2013. Gas and oil exploration accounts for the extraction and permanent destruction due to radioactive contamination of over millions of gallons of fresh water. It is my opinion that the state legislature has an obligation to repeal the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, MCL 125-32052, and give people a voice, not the gas and oil industry. In other words, Michigan Township residents are contacted or noticed in the event of a proposed commercial development in a residentially zoned area with the exception of the gas and oil industry. An oil rig can appear in a residentially zoned area without any notification or rights to homeowners in the surrounding area. Cities have home rule and can protect the health and welfare of their residents. Nonetheless, the amendments of the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act to gear all future fracking activity into townships, thereby reducing the value of all homes for residents in townships while protecting those of cities, appears to be a discriminatory action based upon equal protection. In Michigan, water is more valuable than oil. Instead of giving it away, the state legislature could protect this valuable resource and require businesses to relocate to Michigan, thereby creating the business rebirth that we have been looking for. It is with honor that I present a strong speaker lineup this evening, including Nick Clark, the Michigan Director of Clean Water Action, Jim Nash, the Oakland County Water Resources Commissioner, Larry Brown, Township Trustee, Denise DeMack, a Shelby Township resident and the founder of Citizens Against Residential Drilling, and Howard Rosenberg, West Bloomfield Township Trustee. I didn't know you were attending this evening. Okay. West Bloomfield Development Services Director, Marshall Labadie, and Environmental Manager, John Rhoda, will distribute 3x5 cards for a question and answer period. If you do have questions, please raise your hand during the presentations, and Marshall and John will provide you with the note cards. They will screen the cards to make sure that there are no duplicate questions, and they will forward them to the panel to be answered at the conclusion of the speaker presentations during the question and answer period. Thank you again for attending this evening. Please help me recognize our keynote speaker, Nick Clark.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Is the PowerPoint going to run on the, okay, good deal. So thank you all, and it's great to see so many people here taking the time out of their busy schedules to come learn more about this growing issue here in Michigan. And I do want to thank the Township Supervisor and also Dr. Simonelli in the back of the room for facilitating this and allowing me the opportunity to be here tonight. My name is Nick Clark. I'm the Michigan Director of Clean Water Action. We are the state's largest environmental organization. We have over 250,000 members across the state of Michigan. And people in our organization are very concerned about the issue of fracking and have been for some time. That's why I'm so happy to be here this evening. For many years, most of the work on this issue has been taking place in northern Michigan, and in a minute here we'll show some maps on where a lot of the fracking is taking place historically, but now that it's moving towards the southern half of the state, communities like yours are really getting involved in this issue and helping us move the dialogue forward, so I appreciate that. So let's advance the slide. There we go. So basically, my presentation, I've got about 10 minutes here, so a lot of ground to cover. My presentation is going to focus primarily on some baseline information of what is fracking and how is it different now than it has been in the past. And then what are some state level policy changes, some of those were identified in the video and have been spoken about already, that we can do to better enforce the rules on the books, but also come up with some more common sense regulations. So let's advance the slide. I'd like to go to basically what is happening now in Michigan is that we have what's called new deep well horizontal hydraulic fracturing. And essentially what it is the technology of fracking has improved to allow oil companies to drill up to 1 mile deep, so much deeper than previously we have been able to do, and then pivot that well boring head horizontally and then drill another 2 miles or so underground. And so the issue here is that the drilling's deeper and it requires a much higher volume of water in this process. So essentially, let's advance the slide here. This is kind of a cartoon here of what it is, but I think it helps explain. So what the issue for Michigan is the volume of water that we're using. So step one is water acquisition, right? And when this process first came into the state, we were told that it would only use about 5 million gallons of water per new deep well, which is a startling enough amount in and of itself. But what we found in practice is that some of these wells have used closer to 18 to 20 million gallons per well. And so that water is taken out of our aquifers, essentially at a very low cost. And what they do is they mix it with a series of chemicals and sand, and then it's injected deep into the ground. And what it does is it breaks apart the rock. And these small pockets of gas that were previously not productive enough to encourage drilling, now we can join those areas together and have a large enough pool of gas to be extracting so the companies can make a profit. Then we have an issue with what do we do with all this fluid that's used in the process. A lot of it comes back up. And so there's a significant amount of wastewater that's produced. All of the water that's used in the fracking process is removed from the hydrological cycle and can never be recycled or used for anything again. So each time that they're doing this, we're talking about millions of gallons of water that essentially is thrown out. And what's actually done with it, I think we're going to do questions at the end.
No, I know that, but we were supposed to raise our hands. Thank you.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
For no party.
Okay, great. So let's advance the slide. So we talked a little bit about why are we concerned about this here in Michigan, and I'm sure people in the audience, you all know the answer to why we're concerned, because it's happening right now in your backyards, and there's a lot of interest in new residential drilling. But for our organization, we're primarily concerned about protecting the environment and our water, and that's why we've taken issue with this, Michigan being home to 20% of the world's fresh surface water. We believe that we should be using that commodity in the best way possible. So let's advance. Here's essentially a map of where the traditional deep well horizontal fracking has been taking place. Most of it is in northern Michigan, and primarily in Kalkaska County, where it's been happening. And that's primarily because there's a band of shale rock underneath northern Michigan called the Antrim-Collingwood Shale that has been drilled for gas production. Advance. Let's move on. So we talked about the chemicals, the water used. Let's move on. This is a chart that essentially shows, we're talking about 1% of the overall fluid used in the process is actually chemical. But when you do the math yourself, 1% of 20 million gallons of water is a significant amount. And these are known carcinogens. They're different types of acid. And essentially what this stuff does is it combines with the water and the sand to lubricate the water under high pressure so the water can continue to move on to new fractures and break apart the rock. Part of the issue with this is that we don't exactly know what all of these chemicals are on a given operation. The industry has claimed trade secret protections on this issue, and essentially what that means, the industry likes to tell us that it's something like the secret recipe between Pepsi or Coke, right? That if their recipe gets out of how they do fracking, other companies are going to get a hold of that and use it to their disadvantage. We don't agree with that line. You can buy Pepsi or Coke in the grocery store and take it home and drink it. This stuff is certainly not anything we want to be drinking. The other issue is that accidents happen, and should there be an accident, the people on the scene are going to be first responders in many times rural counties or in a township like your own, and they may not have the proper training or know how to deal with a chemical spill if they don't know exactly what they're dealing with in order to clean it up. We can move on from this point. Go ahead. This is a picture. This issue hits home a little bit to me. So this is one of the first deep well pads in Michigan. This is in northern Michigan, Kalkaska County, and actually just a couple miles down the road from where my family does hunting camp every year. And so I've visited this site, and this well, actually the horizontal leg of this well runs underneath of the Manistee River, which is one of the largest and most pristine rivers in the state of Michigan. When you go to this area of the state, it really is what we're talking about when we have the Pure Michigan ad slogan campaign. But the issue is now when you go down these trails that people use to hunt and fish, you're seeing natural gas wells and a lot of development in these really pristine areas. Move on. We can continue. Let's continue. I know I'm trying to wrap it up here. I want to get to one more. And one more. Here we go, what we're doing about it. So then this next slide here, there's a series of slides that essentially will outline some common sense measures. So Clean Water Action, we joined forces with the Sierra Club. You saw one of the representatives in the video. Several other environmental organizations and lawmakers in Lansing to put together what we believe is a really common sense approach and comprehensive legislative package to address a variety of issues related to fracking here in the state. And one of them being is allowing the public, and actually requiring the public to participate in the permitting process. So holding town hall meetings such as this, where the industry comes up and talks about their plan for expansion of drilling in those communities and allowing the public to provide input on those impacts in their communities. Next one here. We have one issue that has really come up in a lot of local communities is that, I said this earlier, is accidents do happen. And right now, if, let's say someone's groundwater is contaminated, and if you want to try to remediate that and prove that your groundwater was contaminated by a fracking operation, the burden of proof is on you as an individual to be able to demonstrate that contamination happened from that particular source. And so what would that mean? Basically is that when you drilled your well for your home, that you would have to do some sort of baseline testing then and keep that data, and then once your water does become contaminated, or if there's an accident, then do some more testing to be able to demonstrate that that was the cause of the industry. What we're trying to do is reverse that, is put the burden of proof on the industry. They're the ones with the money. They can finance this kind of operation and require that kind of baseline testing. Move on. This is one I really want to talk about, House Bill 4904. This allows counties and townships to regulate operations right in your community. So it was brought up earlier, but it's a point that needs to be taken seriously, is that right now the state regulates the fracking operations with little regard to the impact on the local community or little input from the local community. And so this would take that power back into the most local unit of government, into our townships, into our cities, and allow the people in those communities to decide if this is an industry that they want in their backyard. The other one is that currently these wells can be drilled within 500 feet, 300 to 500 feet of a residence, a school, or any sort of facility. And so we'd like to increase that setback to at least 1,000 feet from these sorts of places. So that's basically the presentation. I'm going to be around for the Q&A session, and I'd love to get into some more of these topics in more depth later on. So thank you all. I appreciate your time this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Jim Nash, our Oakland County Water Resources Commissioner.
Thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm glad you guys are doing this. You've been leaders in this area. Do I have my PowerPoint on here? Yes. There we go. Okay. The first few here we've already passed through. Let me see. Keep going. Keep going. This is the different shale plays. The old one on the left is what we used to do. This is what they call fracking. We've been doing since the 50s. Very shallow, not even a half-mile deep, uses a very small amount of water and chemicals compared to the new one. The biggest one I've heard of in Michigan was 22 million gallons of water used. Keep going. Keep going. We saw this. This is the actual fracking. They put a line down, put explosives on the outside, blow it out, and then they put the, under extreme pressure, they put the basically contaminated water on the ground. Go ahead. 1/5 of that large picture of a tanker truck, that's a small tanker truck, would have been enough for an average old fracking unit, but 21 full tractors of the same size would take for chemicals, just the chemicals, for a large operation fracking. Go ahead. These are the chemicals. Again, they say, oh, it's only 0.5% or 1% of the water used, but these chemicals are measured in parts per billion by human health standards. So when you're measuring parts per billion, that adds up quickly, and it can be very has a very high impact on your health. Go ahead. There's a series of studies, and they've been going on for a while, but they've really started coming out in the past few years. The University of Missouri found that there's hormone-interrupting chemicals that are in fracking fluids. They did studies in Colorado where they went to counties that had heavy fracking operations and counties that had no fracking operations. They would measure the chemicals in these, just in the groundwater that they would find, and they found these hormone-disrupting chemicals in every county that there was heavy drilling, and very little, and almost none in counties that there wasn't any. There was a stream in Kentucky, a small 200-gallon spill of fracking fluid that they didn't report. They found that it killed all the fish in the stream. Every one of them had scarring on their gills from heavy metals. That's another thing that's in fracking fluid when it comes back up. National Academy of Science says fracking contaminates water. It absolutely contaminates water. American Academy of Pediatrics has a study out that they show that volatile organic compounds are organic compounds that come from oil and gas, anything that's organic. And any equipment you have for fracking, wellheads, pipelines, tank farms, leak methane and the chemicals that come up with methane, benzene, other chemicals. Go ahead and go to the next one. Well, it's not here yet, but I'm going to talk about Colorado also was the first state, earlier this year, was the first state to pass state regulation of leakage of methane and other chemicals in the supply chain of gas and oil. And they're the first ones to regulate it. They said if they can regulate it and stop the leakage just in Colorado's system, that would be the equivalent of taking all the vehicles off Colorado's roads in terms of volatile organic compounds. These things are just a constant flow out. Methane is not a poison. Benzene, which is often with it, is a poison. But these volatile organic compounds, if there's a wellhead, a pipeline, a tank farm near a highway or a road, volatile organic compounds mix with exhaust in cars and create ground-level ozone. That's why you're not supposed to pump gas in a hot, windless day. It's the same thing, but these things are putting it out 24/7. So if you're near a road and you live near that, you might be susceptible to ground-level ozone, which has extremely hard effects on the lungs. Hydroelectric connectivity. Now, this is a University of Michigan study that people on the fracking side like to quote. But if you read the study, they only quote the parts that they like. In a whole bunch of areas in these studies, they say that there is not enough Michigan-specific data to reach any conclusions on the effect in Michigan. Well, there's lots of data in other states. But what that says is when the DEQ makes claims and the gas companies make claims that there's never been a case of any contamination in Michigan, that's because almost no wells until very recently ever had baseline testing before drilling. So that nobody knows what's in that water aquifer before drilling. After drilling, 99% of them were never tested either. But nowadays they're starting to be tested. In court, if all the company has to say is, well, if you don't have a baseline test, then that probably existed before we drilled. It's not our responsibility. If you have baseline testing, they can't do that. There's new legislation in Lansing offered by DEQ that would mitigate that some, but it doesn't go far enough. There's a whole bunch of other issues that they mention, and specifically the impact of large equipment, trucks, traffic, the water coming through, all those things have an effect on the people right there in those communities. Go ahead. This is a fracking site. These are all trucks that are, this part is not the drilling, this is the fracking, the high pressure they're using. Large area, very heavy traffic, it goes on, it's extremely noisy. Go ahead. The EPA says that methane contamination was detected in private wells after the drilling started in concentrations exceeding before. They'll always say they have that little thing from the 50s that sometimes you used to get, and sometimes you still do. You can get methane from the aquifer, it develops underground and comes up. That does happen. But it also happens through this, and if you have fracking area, you're more likely to have more of that. Duke University has shown that there's extremely large amounts of contaminated fluid can go out. The Greene County, Pennsylvania, in February had a wellhead explode. It vaporized the person that was working nearby. It blew up a tanker truck nearby, and it burned for over a week because they had to bring in a crew from Texas to put out the fire. Local fire departments can't put out a fire like that. The oil company came back and gave everybody a pizza. these kind of things happen. They say, well, you know, it's not the drilling itself, it's accidents. Well, the accident's happening where the drilling is happening. So it might not actually be the actual drilling, it could be an accident, but it still kills fish in streams, it still contaminates water. Go ahead. Harmful pollutants are emitted from this industry can result in serious health impacts. This is from the U.S. Health Department. The oil and gas industry is a large source of VOC emissions. Colorado becomes the first state, as I mentioned. All these have sites. If you're ever interested, you can go to my website, oakgov.com/water, and look for it on my website. You'll find it. Go ahead. Michigan is a prime source of fracking sand. We have not had that become a big industry yet for fracking. We're the biggest supplier of sand in the Midwest, you might guess, because we're surrounded by the Great Lakes. But our sand in particular is a single mineral sand. It's very important for fracking. Multi-mineral sands break too easy. They can't stand the pressure of the rocks, so they use this kind. They're expecting that to really take off in Michigan. The Halliburton loophole, a lot of people deny it's there, but it is there. The states are the ones that regulate. The federal government basically stepped away from regulating fracking, and it's up to the states. Our state has some better rules than others. Fracking waste has to be stored in sealed metal containers. That's good. So other states allow it to sit out in the open to evaporate, and we breathe it. Bad idea. But we still need more and more thorough regulation, and I think it's extremely important for local control. It's one of the most important things we can have. Please go ahead. With water withdrawals, we talked about that. The water is destroyed. It can never be used again. It has to be either it has to be injected into the ground to be disposed of. It can't be used again. Human nature, Murphy's Law. If you have large chemicals in neighborhoods, Murphy's Law. Somebody's going to have a spill. Somebody's going to have an accident. The flaring associated with natural gas burn-off, at least during the drilling stage, noisy, smells bad, very large flame that can be very distracting. Wastewater disposal, again, we have toxic spills, we have accidents like the one in Kentucky. Please go. Again, 10 to 15% in the chain is lost. Natural gas is a much more climate reactive chemical, so it also increases that. As I mentioned, there's the claim that there's no cases of water contamination. Just recently, and I have I think a slide here, just a couple of weeks ago, Pennsylvania's Department of Environmental Protection put out a study of 243 specific cases of water contamination from fracking, either from the fracking itself or from accidents. Many of these were multiple wells. These are aquifers that we're talking about. And again, as Michelle said, our Oakland County is the source of 5 watersheds. Whatever happens here heads out in other areas, and it can affect other people. For me, I'm a sustainability advocate. Everything we do as a society, as a government, as an industry, even as individuals, we need to be looking ahead. We need to see what our impacts in the future are going to be. That's never been a tradition here. It took 5 times of the Cuyahoga River to catch fire before somebody said, you know, we could stop that. It brought the Clean Water Act. These things can happen, but it just takes the will of the people. Please go ahead. This is the report from Pennsylvania. 243 cases. Many are multiple impact cases of oil and gas contamination of local people. And when the DEQ says flatly there's never been a case, they're not telling you the whole truth. They're not telling you that they have no data to show that they're just saying this because nobody's come to them and said, look, I have contaminated water here, that they believe, that they've gone out and checked out. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. Please go ahead. One more. This is my favorite. This was a headline in the Wall Street Journal. The Exxon CEO, an oil man, goes around the country telling everybody there's nothing to fear from fracking. Anything is just silly if you have worries about it. He is now suing to stop a fracking operation near his house, specifically mentioning the potential harm to his property values, the heavy traffic, all the things that everybody else is saying is a problem, that he's been saying all this time, you guys are making this up, but he's now a party in a lawsuit making those exact same claims. It makes you wonder. And the U.S. Bureau of Economic Research, who is funded very heavily by very conservative organizations, it's a national group that does a lot of economic research, generally quite good, and they have shown that there is a significant risk of loss of property value. They say especially if you have well water, if you depend on well water, that's the most important threat in terms of property value loss, but there's also just plain accidents. And again, we here, especially this community, is surrounded by water. I mean, you guys depend for your economic vitality on the water that you enjoy, whether you're drinking it or swimming, boating, fishing, whatever you do. All those things I love doing. So we have to protect that. And to me, when even the head of the biggest oil company in the world says, yeah, not by my house, that's something that we all should, these guys know what they're talking about, and when they tell you it's no problem, they're not saying the same things in their own homes. I think there's one more, maybe. Okay, I try to never talk about this unless I talk about alternatives. We have new technologies coming out every single day that show incredible promise for energy and for totally clean energy production. More jobs are being created in the green energy fields right now than the oil industry. Even with all the fracking we're doing, we're creating jobs in these areas. We're saving money. The potential is there for huge savings, not just in money, but in our health, in our lives, in our property values. And so we have to be able to understand that there's an issue we need to answer, but we can't just ignore the fact that we need energy resources, so we need to start going for the more clean energy resources. So that's it for me, and if I can answer questions, let me know. Thank you.
I'd like to commend Commissioner Nash for all of his hard work over the past 2 years, speaking in many communities about this important issue. Our next speaker is Trustee Lawrence Brown.
It's a lot of information being given this evening. I'm going to discuss a few reports and the findings that happened. The first is the University of Michigan Graham Sustainability Institute's recent $600,000 hydraulic fracturing in Michigan Integrated Assessment and Public Health report. The report demonstrated existing scientific evidence of public health hazards pertaining to injuries, noise, odor, silica, intentional use chemicals, byproduct chemicals, transportation, air quality, water quality, habitat and wildlife impacts, food and animal earthquakes, public perception, environmental justice, health and social services, and local socioeconomics. The University of Michigan also had a report September 3, 2013. Public Health and Hydraulic Fracturing in Michigan report defines public health as the science and art of protecting and improving the health of communities through education, promotion of healthy lifestyles, and research for disease and injury prevention. Public health works to prevent health problems before they occur. The report focuses on reviewing public health risks and benefits in 3 primary environments. The first is in hydraulic fracturing workplace, the second in ecological environments that surround facilities, and the third are communities that are situated near facilities. Hazards found in workplace injuries include exposure to excessive noise and inadequate lighting conditions, exposures to silica and industrial chemicals. Hazards found in surrounding environment include impaired local and regional air quality, water pollution, and degradation of ecosystems. Possible hazards in communities include increased traffic and motor vehicle accidents, stress related to risks, perception, and boomtown associated effects such as a strained healthcare system and road degradation. A March 2012 National Geographic cover story article, America Strikes Oil, The Promise and Risk of Fracking, cited horrifying stories about frackers who are exposed to hydrogen sulfide, a poisonous gas from bacteria that grows in wells, and how pumping dirty water from a tanker trucks just for moments, after a hydrogen sulfide detector sounded, left a worker in a week-long bout of vomiting. It also explained fracking as the process of combining large amounts of fresh water and sand and other substances, some toxic, which are driven under high pressure down wells drilled into deep layers of shale, creating cracks through which bubbles of trapped oil and natural gas can escape into a well that descend 2 miles and then turns horizontally Historically, there have been strong efforts to protect the Great Lakes. The state of New York is doing their part with protecting the Great Lakes by imposing a 3-year, understand, a 3-year fracking moratorium. Since water has no boundaries, understand, water has no boundaries. All states surrounding the Great Lakes must take a united approach to protecting the Great Lakes. The global population depends on this valuable resource. So I hope some of this is repetitive, but it's so important that we all take part in trying to control what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Brown. Our next speaker is Denise DeMack. She is a Shelby Township resident, a homeowner next to the oil rig that appeared in her community in August, and the founder of Citizens Against Residential Drilling.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you all for being here, and thank you for inviting me to speak. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go. This actually is a YouTube video that was shot, and you don't have the audio, but I'm going to talk about it anyways. This.
You don't see it up there?
You don't see it up there? It's on that one. Just a minute. There we go. All right, so this is my neighborhood. This area here was considered the gem of Shelby Township. When we were looking to build or buy, we were told by realtors that this was the crown jewel of Shelby Township. It's really sad what happened here. We were landlocked. We were surrounded by wetlands. We are back up to a metro park. We are zoned residential. We did our, crossed our T's, dotted our I's. My husband and I, when we were looking, and along with many of the residents, and it was, it's surrounded by 1,000 homes this well. As far as being zoned residential, we didn't expect this at all to pop up in the middle of our neighborhood, and we didn't sign up for it. We would take long walks at night along this bike path here. This is a path that you're seeing right now, and if you go home and you watch the video, you'll hear the droning of the drill in the background along with birds chirping, which is a strange phenomenon. But this bike path here, we would take long walks on, and we would say how blessed we were, how lucky we were to be living in the neighborhood, to be living in America. And what I say to people now is be careful. It can be you, And so this type of operation, and you'll see the drill here coming up at night. You just right over this. So this is all wetlands, by the way, that you're viewing right now, as you probably recognize in your own township here. This probably looks very familiar. You come up over the bike path, and less than 100 feet from the bike path, and you'll see it very clearly in a few minutes here, is the drill. The drill actually was 450 feet, 0.26 inches, which is exactly the minimum. 450 feet is exactly the minimum that you could be from your foundation, your back door, not your lot, not your patio, but your back door. And next slide, please. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. This here is my neighborhood. This was a Chopper 4 shot of the media. This is Briarwood Preserve. The drill is actually in Briarwood Preserve subdivision. Creekside Village subdivision is right over those trees there, and so that's what separates us. Go ahead and next slide, please. Again, this is the layout of the subdivision called Briarwood Preserves. There's actually homes on lot now 7 and 8, and 24, 25, and 26. And the red star at the far corner there is a lot on a cul-de-sac that's called Buckhorn Drive, and that is where the oil well was drilled. Next slide, please. Okay, and the red star again is the oil well. Now, all the homes now are pretty much filled in. The north side of the star, along to the right, there's cloud cover over Stonewick Lake there. pond, and then coming around the right. So not even to the left of DeQuinder or south of 25. That's over 1,000 homes, okay, and condominiums. When you, and this is all residentially zoned. As you can see, we're pretty landlocked. I mean, there is nowhere to go there. Again, 450.26 from the foundations of our home in this area. So very densely populated. Next slide, please. This is what we woke up to. So in the middle of the night, July 24th, we woke up and we thought, well, that's strange. They're doing construction in the middle of the night. Some people thought it was a cell phone tower. We were unsure. And we looked at this, was unsure what it was. And next slide, please. During the daylight hours, next slide, yeah. This is a 118-foot derrick. And so that's what we got to experience. This operation goes 24/7. You know, it was quite shocking to see that. Many of us recognized what that was. Some of us still didn't know what that was. Next slide, please. We had 2 town hall meetings right away. The first one, we were invited by the MDEQ because they were getting lots of calls, and the OOGM, Office of Oil and Gas and Minerals. First town hall meeting drew 350 people within 6 days of notice of that meeting. This one here was our event from Citizens Against Residential Drilling. We invited an environmental consultant on August 20th, just drew 800 people. The gentleman there, his name is Chris Grobel, and he said he hadn't seen a crowd like that since the Superfund. And most of you probably know what the Superfunds meant back then. Next slide, please. And so from the town hall meeting with the MDEQ, Office of Oil and Gas and Minerals, I call it the OOGM for short, one thing we found out, they refer to our well as the Nino Holmes Well 1-6. It's the first of its kind in all of St. Clair, all of Oakland, all of Macomb, all of Wayne, and all of Monroe. Think of how large that area is. And they admitted it's the first of its kind. Now, to be the first of its kind and be that unique, what do you need? You need all 3 elements. Densely populated area, population of 70,000 or more per MDEQ. You need it to be zoned residential. In our case, not only is it zoned residential, we're 450 feet from our back door. And then drilled exactly like this one, which means we're being drilled directionally enhanced with chemicals, an acid matrix stimulation solution. And a little drilling 101 here. Conventional drilling is another technique you're going to hear over and over again from the oil industry. You know, we've been doing this for 30 years in your area. Don't even worry about it. Most of us thought it meant a reservoir of liquid oil that only requires a pump jack. No special procedures required. And essentially, this is how the industry defines conventional drilling. As drilling in a conventional reservoir that is still in rock, but a rock layer that on a permeable gradient would not be anticipated to require pressures and fluid volumes and enhanced oil procedures to physically initiate a fracture or fit the industry a current state definition of hydraulic fracturing, a very dense layer of shale. Instead, the target layer here is the Trenton Black River. This is where it gets interesting. It's a more porous carbonate layer of limestone. In this conventional reservoir, they would be enhancing existing natural pores or fractures, but would not have to initiate a fracture by using high volumes and high pressures. So are they technically fracking by the industry terminology? No. Are they doing something similar? Yes. So some people who are outside of the industry refer to this as fracking light, like Coke, Diet Coke, or fracking like, L-I-K-E. So oil companies can technically say something like, we've been drilling wells like this one for 25 to 30 years in Macomb, and sure, they've been drilling the conventional reservoirs, limestone. They're going after the same rock. So conventional drilling has nothing to do about the apparatus or the technique. It has everything to do about the reservoir or the rock literally below your feet. Next slide, please. They told us we were getting a smaller derrick. They said there's several phases of drilling. The first phase is drilling. The second phase is well completion. So that's where we were headed. And they said, don't worry, you're going to get a much smaller derrick. We did. This one here was 18 feet shorter. It's 100 feet. So next slide, please. So now we're hooked up for chemicals. At this point, we were under pretty much panic. That is not a tanker truck. That holds the chemicals. Next slide, please. As you can see, this is a very industrial process that's happening right in the center of our neighborhood where children play. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Again, very scary, to be honest with you. We drove up. You could drive right up to the site. The strange thing about this well is you literally can drive down Buckhorn Drive and drive right to the well, and you'd be less than, I don't know, 100 feet from it, 50 feet, and so you could get good shots of what was going on. And somebody once yelled to us, and they said, "You need a hard hat, that's it." Okay, good. Next slide, please. Again, tank, the red is chemicals, holds chemicals, the black one holds some kind of pressure fluid, liquid nitrogen, something I remember they told us. Next slide, please. So here we are today. So there was lots of calls to governor, DEQ, a lot of media attention, got organized, and West Bay decided to regulate themselves. So what they did, this is called a Christmas tree that you're viewing here. And so that's where we are today. They temporarily halted activity in Macomb. Now, they use the word indefinitely, okay? And immediately everybody went, the media said, they're shutting down indefinitely. And I was so glad that we had a smart reporter that said, does that mean permanently? No, indefinite means I don't have a date to give you yet to when we're going to start back up. We just got the MDEQ field notes, and the MDEQ field notes said later in the fall, which means sometime before Christmas. I heard just recently some talk about February. I'm hoping not at all. Next slide, please. So one thing people always ask me is, what can I do? I tell people, you know, keep learning, you know, keep asking questions, keep researching. Don't accept the propaganda and stuff. Look things up. Ask geologists. I found a lot of my information from geologists. Contact state and local public officials and candidates. Ask them, you know, these questions about residential drilling. Mention Shelby Township. That one is very close to you now. Talk to others about the issue. Organize your school, your neighborhoods. That's what we did. We were just a group of normal people. We're now very departmentalized. We have a media area, we have a law area, we have a communications area, we have a marketing area, we have an events person, so legislation liaison, so we're very, very organized. I suggest everybody do that. You can join Citizens Against Residential Drilling. We have a website, we have a Facebook page. We're constantly updating it. We're constantly giving people ideas on action items and stuff to protect your own neighborhoods. Sign petitions, collect additional signatures, and return them to us. More than likely, there will be a ballot initiative next year. And what I tell people is, you know, volunteer to canvass, man a booth, do something to help that. Support state and local ballot initiatives or legislation. Support that promote balanced, responsible oil and gas development. And so those are some of the things that you can do, and hopefully that all together we can prevent this from coming to a neighborhood near you. Thank you.
Thank you kindly, Denise. It's nice to have that first-hand feedback of what you experienced in Shelby Township. Our next speaker is Treasurer Terry Weingarten.
Thank you. That's a hard act to follow. Wow. Hi, I'm Terry Weingarten. As the West Bloomfield Township Lake Board representative, I'm very pleased to be here tonight. I've personally been following this issue for the last couple of years, thanks to the efforts of your group and other groups out there, and I do encourage all of you to go on Facebook and go on websites and really try to get more educated. It's very important to have a passion for the safety of our water. I particularly want to thank Jim Nash. I know he's been doing his little world tour, doing these town hall meetings and trying to educate people, which is really the most important thing we can do. As some of you may be aware, the West Bay Exploration Company had been conducting systemic blasting, looking for gas and oil in or nearby area in Bloomfield Township. They've been doing this for the last 2 to 3 years, and thankfully, they still have not discovered that there is any gas or oil in this area that would then encourage them to take these next steps. So hopefully, because we're very nearby, the same would hold true in West Bloomfield and through Oakland County. However, having said that, I want to caution you to being complacent. Water, as we've said, and as we all know, is a very fluid commodity. So if you have contaminated water, it can very easily flow between waterways. Oakland County has 5 watersheds. West Bloomfield has 28 lakes, 150 ponds, woodlands, and wetlands, and they're all interconnected. So if we have a problem in any community, it can easily come to our community. We need all communities to urge their state representatives to take an active role in this issue. Let them know that you will vote for them based on this issue, because there are very strong lobbyists out there, and you need to let your voice be heard over any of those interests. We're very lucky here in West Bloomfield that we do have very committed state legislators, but you really need to spread the word. As treasurer, I'm always concerned with property values and tax revenue, but this is not just a property value issue. This is important as far as the value of our properties, but even more important is the safety and welfare of our families. I personally live on Middle Straits Lake, and we do drink from the well that is by our house every day, and we do go on the waterways, and we trust that they're going to be safe. But we need to take an active stance so that we can make sure that the water will continue to be safe for us, for our kids, our grandkids, and for generations to come. So thank you, everyone, for your passion, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Our final speaker prior to question and answer is Trustee Howard Rosenberg.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. Charter Township of West Bloomfield hosted the first of Commissioner Nash's Oakland County Water Resource Commissioner's fracking town hall tours. He and we have long been pioneers of ordinances aimed at protecting our rich environmental resources by adapting a floodway, floodplain, watercourse, and wetland protection ordinance. This occurred in 1980, as well as woodland conservation, environmental feature setback, stormwater management, fertilizer grading, and drainage and soil erosion and sedimentation control ordinances. Residential oil drilling jeopardizes all of these previous efforts since, as we've heard, water has no boundaries, and the township, as we've heard, is at the headwaters of 3 watersheds, the Clinton, Huron, and Rouge, and maintains a natural, interconnected stormwater storage and conveyance system whereby all of its environmental resources are connected. On August 20th, 2012, we, the Township Board, led by Supervisor Uresti, approved our first moratorium resolution on oil and natural gas drilling and hydraulic fracturing within the township. And we've approved 2 extensions of the moratorium to determine options in an unregulated state for this activity. The township is working currently to strengthen its floodway, floodplain, watercourse, and wetland protection ordinance in order to limit the extraction of surface waters for well drilling operations, as well as the discharge of drilling materials to surface waters of wetland areas. Now here's my question. Why do cities have the right to control zoning regulations as they relate to directional drilling and townships don't? This is a troubling problem for all of us, and we believe that we should have the same rights as cities of equal size. We believe we have the right to determine what goes on in our backyards. We believe that a faceless bureaucrat in the drilling department in Lansing should not have the authority to place a drill next to your property. Conservative, libertarian, and progressive think tanks strongly support local control. This country is based on self-determination. I have the right granted to me in the Constitution to enjoy my privacy and peace. This includes my property rights. I therefore have the right to determine through my local elected officials the zoning rules for my community. and I have the right to tell the state that I don't want oil drilling to occur. Directional drilling is a wolf in sheep's clothing. It promises you safe, inexpensive energy, but what it delivers will cause an environmental catastrophe of epic proportions. Loss of drinking water, loss of the use of land, rivers and streams, and tremendous loss of property values. There have been earthquakes in Oklahoma that have been directly related to fractional drilling. We don't need this, we don't want this, and our legislature in Lansing needs to prioritize the voice of the people, not the gas and oil industry, which is exporting this commodity. We're not even using it. It's leaving the state. They're selling it elsewhere. And it's at our expense, our property values. This is not good for us. I have been elected your township trustee to represent your interest. I'm your neighborhood representative. I don't have the ability to do that. You have the ability to help us do that. Your state legislators are Clint Kesto in the 39th district. It's here in Commerce. Mike McCready in Birmingham in here, and your state senator is Mike Kowal. You need to tell them, you need to contact them, you need to tell them that they need to repeal Michigan Zoning Enabling Act 3205. And you need to tell them that they need to pass House Bill 4904. They want you to vote for them in 3 weeks. Ask them how they feel about this today, and then decide how you're going to vote. I'm understanding they're all backpedaling and soft-stepping this issue. This is unacceptable to me. I'm not going to vote for anybody that's not going to allow me, as your local representative, to support and control our own zoning and tell us what can go in the neighborhoods next to us. And I hope that it's good that you're here tonight, because I can't do this myself, and I want to thank Michelle for setting this up to bring you all here, because we need your help. Your voice can be heard. So thank you for attending. Feel welcome to direct questions to us now. We'll answer them. The township supervisor is available. You can contact her by visiting the township website and clicking on her email address. You're also welcome to contact myself or any member of the speaker panel. My contact information is on our new West Bloomfield website. If you haven't been to it, you should. It's a nice site. The new address is www.wbtownship.org. Demand to have a voice on oil and gas residential drilling by talking to your legislatures. Repeal Zoning Enabling Act 3205. Support Act 4904. Let us ban oil and gas regulation drilling in this community. Thank you very much.
I do want to thank everyone for attending this evening. Greatly appreciate your support, your interest in learning more about this important issue. Thanks again for attending. I want to thank the speaker panel. Thank you.